But joining me now, always good to catch up with our buddy Roxy Bernstein from the Pac-12 Network. Does a bunch of stuff with ESPN, too. He's very busy, and so Brady made us go long last segment, so we better get to him now. Just kidding. My fault. Roxy, what's up, man? How are you?
Spence, how you doing, man?
Doing well, brother. Let's start last night. I mean, I want to talk some college hoops, but you're a Heisman voter, and so you saw the Heisman Trophy winner last night, and I think it's the best season we've ever seen from a quarterback, Roxy, and I think there's an argument to be made that that's the best offensive team in college football history. What'd you make of LSU stomping Clemson last night?
That was, first off, it was just an entertaining game. And then LSU pulls away. But Joe Burrow, even when he was struggling, or at least the LSU offense was struggling early in the game, I didn't think he was struggling necessarily. I thought it was more his receivers, and they had opportunities to make plays early in the game in tight coverage, and they didn't. But then once they got rolling, they're so difficult to stop. And Clemson kept getting pressure. And when he took that big hit right before the end of the first half, you're wondering, okay, how's that going to affect him for the second half? And, what's going on with Joe Burrow? And then, boom, he was almost as effective in the second half as he was in the first. And he's showing you why. Not only is he deserving of the Heisman Trophy, but he's going to be the number one pick in the NFL draft. And it's pretty remarkable considering he was a fourth or fifth round guy coming into this season. Nobody really had him on the radar. And here he is as one of the most decorated seasons in the history of college football.
And you know, in this business, Roxy, we just love great stories. And Ed Orgeron is a great story. Fired at Ole Miss, not USC enough for USC. A lot of people think he was like the third or the fourth choice for LSU. He doesn't look like Urban Meyer. He doesn't sound like Nick Saban, but I love him, and I think he's easy to cheer for. So what do you make of that storyline?
Well, it's clear Spence's players love him too, right? The way they respond to him, the way they just rally around him. And he's so humble. And you listen to him last night, it's not about him. And he had plenty of opportunities to make it about him. He's from Louisiana and able to take LSU to a national championship in New Orleans. And it was all about the players, deflecting to them. And I think that's why his players gravitate toward him and why they play so hard for him is because they identify with him. He's genuine. He's real. And I'm sure there's some USC people kicking themselves for not hiring him when they had the opportunity to. But at the same time, it's sometimes things work out the way they're supposed to. And Fred Orgeron, maybe he was supposed to go back to LSU, and he did by winning a national championship last night, and you have to really pull for the guy, considering that many people laughed it off when he was hired by LSU. And they said, oh, what a joke, what are they doing? Well, LSU clearly knew what he was doing, and he hired a terrific staff around him, and that innovative offense with Joe Brady is pretty impressive to watch.
So you're a good guest for us to have on. I mean, you always are, but today it's great to have you because recently you have called both a Utah game and a BYU game. We'll start with the run in Utes. And Roxy, as you know, Larry has a really young team, and they're probably realistically a year away from making hay in the conference and hopefully making the NCAA tournament. They've had some good wins. You know, they beat BYU and they beat Kentucky, but you were on the call and they got smashed in Boulder. Your takeaway from that game?
Sunday was a perfect storm, to be honest, at least in my opinion, Spence, for Colorado and for Utah. They had the Buffs just stinging from a game they blew and gave away the previous Sunday to Oregon State, so they had to stew on that for a week. And you know they were getting an earful from Tad Boyle the whole week in the build-up for that game, and it's a veteran team in Colorado where all the youth, and you're on the road in your first conference road game. I think, unfortunately for Utah, it showed. And I still think they're talented. I still think they're going to be a good basketball team. But when you have so many freshmen like Larry Kraskowiak does, considering he has 12 newcomers, 10 true freshmen on this roster, they're going to have some growing pains. They're going to have some ups and downs. And it just got away from them. And we've seen that a couple of times. But at the same time, we see the potential from this group. And I'm anxious to see, as they continue on the road this week, how they bounce back. You know, Arizona's going to be upset considering the way they played in Corvallis Sunday night. So they're going to be looking to get a piece of Utah on Thursday night. And then I'll see Utah again on Saturday night with Bill Walton at Arizona State. And I'm anxious just to see how they respond because I do like the pieces that Larry has. It's just going to take some time with all this youth and everybody trying to fit together.
So Roxy Bernstein, Bill Walton on Saturday, Utah ASU. Oh yes! Hey,
yep,
Brady,
you got it.
Brady, tag the
television.
Tag the DVR for that one. Oh man, that is. Hey, how are your Saturdays different when you know you're calling a game with Walton that night?
That's a good question because the prep is so vastly different. And yes, I'm still prepping to do the game the same and get as much information on each team as I possibly can. But at the same time, I know I'm in for a bumpy ride along the way. And just be prepared for that and knowing what's going to be in store because I don't know what Bill's thinking or what he's going to do. He doesn't tip me off, doesn't tip anybody off on the crew what he's thinking. So, yeah, it's a little different, but I enjoy the challenge and I embrace it every time.
You know, it's interesting you say that because that's how I wanted to follow up. I mean, I've met Bill a few times and he's always been very nice, very kind. So he doesn't tell you guys at all where
Nothing.
he's going to go. Wow, that's
Nothing.
you know what? That's a little difficult though, to be honest.
It can be, and you know, even if, for example, we're at the walkthrough shoot-arounds the morning of the game and we don't converse at all. He just wants it that way. He wants it to be completely spontaneous and natural when it's on the air. And essentially the first time I'm talking to Bill all day is, good evening, welcome to Tempe, along with the Hall of Famer Bill Walton. I'm Roxy Bernstein. Bill, and that because even if I say, hey, Bill, how you doing? You know, good morning, Bill. He'll look at me and have that look and, you know, he knows exactly who I am. And he'll, of course, his shtick, I know you. You're Roxy. We work together a lot. Yes, Bill. How you doing? Save it for air. And that's like the end of our morning conversation right there.
Huh.
We'll go sit in opposite ends of the gym, and we'll take in the visiting team shoot-around and the home team shoot-around without really talking to one another. And then we'll go do the game, and then after the game we go to dinner. So that's like the agenda for a Bill Walton Saturday.
Okay, real moment of honesty, Roxy, and you're such a pro, I would never know unless I asked you directly. Does it ever get frustrating? Do you ever want to look at him and be like, Bill, come on, man, like, stick with me here?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, but that's does the viewer, are you watching at home, Spencer, do you have that feeling?
No, not at all. That's why I wanted to ask you.
Of course, you know, look, when the game is good, that's when I have to fight it a little bit more.
Sure.
Right? And try to rein him in. Hey, Bill, we got a 4-point game here. There's little subtle things I'll say just to try to get Bill to focus on the game that we have instead of telling me about how many bridges there are in the city of Portland or how many lakes there are in the state of Minneapolis. But it's part of the beauty that is Bill Walton and the entertainment factor that he brings with him. And it's part of my job also not to get caught up in it. But, hey, I've got a job to do, and part of my job is we're to talk about this basketball game, whether Bill likes it or not.
You know what? Actually, let me rescind my answer because from my seat watching you, I would be frustrated. So what I meant was I can never tell if you are. I would be, but I can never tell if you are.
There may be hints in my voice, but that's, you know, and Bill also loves to get a rise, whether it's out of me, whether it's out of Dave Pasch. Now, Dave probably needles him a little bit meaner than I do. Mm-hmm. But we both have our creative ways of trying to get Bill back on track. And a lot of it is in good fun, believe me. And a lot of it's for that effect on television. So for people to take notice and what did he say? And that's part of Bill's charm.
Absolutely. And it is entertaining for the viewer. But anyway, I digress. You referenced it. Utah is at Arizona on Thursday. We know that Arizona has tremendous talent. It's been a little bit of an up and down season for them. I wouldn't be surprised if come Pac-12 tournament time, they've really kind of righted the ship and they're a dangerous team. But what do you think the Utes are in for on Thursday night, Roxy?
I'm anxious to see from Arizona's perspective because you have to imagine Utah is going to be focused, right? That they're upset with the way they played on Sunday night, and they're going to look to make a better showing in Tucson. But by the same token, so is Arizona and Sean Miller. And a lot like Utah in terms of so many new pieces for Arizona. And that electrifying freshman duo in the backcourt of Nico Mannion and Josh Green plus Zeke Naji. It's a great freshman class. And then some guys off the bench, a couple of grad transfers. But it's similar to Utah that they have a lot of new parts. They're still trying to figure each other out. And they struggle still a little bit defensively. I think that was pretty obvious in the game Sunday night. Yet last Thursday night, you could make the claim that they got a raw deal in the game against Oregon, where Ignacy probably was fouled at the final horn, which wasn't called. Then the game goes into overtime, and they lose by a point. So at times they've looked really good, and at times they've struggled. But I'm looking to see more consistency from Arizona because I am a big believer in their talent.
I want to get your thoughts on the Cougars on BYU, since you were on the call for the BYU St. Mary's game. It's tough to analyze, Roxy, who they are without Yoli. Yoli's really good, and he's their best player. He's a 20-10 guy and can shoot it from the outside. But they battled, sent the game to overtime. St. Mary's obviously very good as well. But as you called that game, what stood out to you about Mark Pope's team? The
resiliency, Spencer, they showed in the heart. Because a lot of teams could have just mailed it in. Oh, Yoli's down. He's going to be out a few weeks, it looks like, with the finger injury, and we're on the road, a tough environment. But the way T.J. Haws and Jake Toolson came out and played, and they set the tone for that team, and the way they were getting solid contributions for the entire lineup that night was impressive. And St. Mary's got all they could handle, and we're lucky to survive and beat BYU. And the late surge by BYU to force overtime showed a lot. So I think it's a program that is playing very well, especially defensively. And that's something that we don't necessarily associate with BYU basketball. For years, Dave Rose, and he had so much success and won a lot of games, and he had one of the most entertaining styles in college basketball, right? You watch BYU, you came away from that game the majority of the time thoroughly entertained the way they could get up and down the floor, whether it was guys like Tyler Haws or Kyle Collinsworth. You go on and on and on with the talent that Dave had and the way they could really fill it up. Well, it's a little bit different now. Yes, they have that firepower offensively, but I think they're a little bit more defensive, detailed, and oriented than we've seen in the past. And I think that gives them the opportunity to win a game at St. Mary's even without Yoli. And look, they went to Houston, who's a really good team, without Yoli, and won. They beat UCLA. They beat Virginia Tech without him. And I think a lot of it has to do with what the identity is Mark Pope is trying to instill in this BYU team.
Got to give you a little credit, Roxy, before I set you loose. I love it when broadcasters are willing to get a little bit creative. And I had a couple of TVs going on Sunday because obviously with the NFL stuff and college hoops, the Jazz were playing too. And so I was kind of paying attention to something else. And all of a sudden I heard a Rush lyric. And I was like, wait, what? Let me rewind that. And you were dropping Rush lyrics throughout the broadcast. It was from the song The Trees. And look, Neil Peart, for my money, the best drummer that I've ever seen live. So I'm a fan. So credit to you. How many people picked up what you were laying down there, Roxy?
As the game went on, because I started with more obscure Rush references at the beginning, and then as the game went on, I got to more of the mainstream stuff. And I think by the time the game was over, Spence, I probably dropped 15 different song lyrics throughout the course of the broadcast.
Nice.
As you heard The Trees, it was a reference to Stanford, right? Because Stanford's undefeated on top of the Pac-12. Okay, I altered the lyrics to fit the narrative for me. There is no unrest in the forest or trouble with the trees because Stanford's on top of the Pac-12. And then I was able to work in, of course, toward the end, Tom Sawyer, Limelight, The Spirit of Radio. I spent a lot of time, especially in the passing of the legendary Neil Peart on Friday night, just thinking about it. I'm a huge Rush guy. Spence, I've probably seen him over 100 times live.
Oh, wow.
In fact, I've flown into Salt Lake City twice to see them. I saw that last tour when they were there. Was it the Maverick Center?
Maverick
That's
Center,
where they played.
Mm-hmm. Yep,
so
Maverick
I went
Center.
there. Yeah, I flew in with one of my ESPN directors who's just as sick as I am when it came to Rush. In fact, met up with a couple of the BYU basketball coaches and Greg Wrubell there, the voice of BYU,
nice,
at the show. And I took my 8-year-old daughter, what turns out to be the last show ever on August 1st, 2015, she's now 12, but just to see it. And she had to see with Daddy because everybody pretty much knew that was the last show, and I'm so glad now that I did it.
Right on. Well, yeah, I mean, I think I've seen him 3 times, so I'm not near on your level, but I have a very healthy appreciation and certainly a sad day. Roxy, it's always great to catch up with you. Safe travels for wherever you're headed next, and we'll have you on soon, man. Be well, okay?
Anytime. Thanks for having me, man.
There he is.